world's on fire. Don't touch me, I'm a real live wire. Psycho killer, qu'est-ce que c'est? Better run, 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 run away. Oh.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Terra Obscura, the show where we look at the best and worst horror has to offer. I'm your host, The Fear Fan, and thanks for tuning in. You know, when I first started this show, one of my goals was to introduce people to new horror movies. While I've done that a few times in the past, it sometimes seems like I concentrate a bit much on bigger names, such as A Nightmare on Elm Street, and more recently, the Friday the 13th films. Well, today we're going to fix all that by putting the obscure back in Obscura with 1981's Wolfen. Usually, when I mention Wolfen to my fellow horror aficionados, the answer is a resounding, huh? And to be honest, I don't blame them. Unlike so many other great horror films of the period, there wasn't a prominent horror director involved or a famous scream queen, and there was no endless parade of sequels to ensure that people remember the original long after it would have otherwise faded away. But if that's the case, then why was this movie made? It's certainly not a low-budget independent film, so what made a major studio invest all that time and money in making it? The answer can be summed up with a single name, Whitley Strieber. If you're not super familiar with the name, don't worry, you're not alone. Back during the horror boom of the 80s, producers and publishers were scrambling to snatch up new horror properties wherever they could. One of these was author Whitley Strieber, whose first novel, Wolfen, cracked the bestseller charts. That, and a string of successful horror novels that followed it, led people to believe that he might be the next Stephen King. At least until he claimed he was abducted by aliens, published a non-fiction account of the event, and mainly wrote about that thereafter. As you can imagine, he was mainly known for that afterward rather than his writing. But if you think that he got a raw deal, keep in mind that when the incident was turned into a movie, he was portrayed by Christopher Walken in an Oscar-worthy, award-winning performance for the ages. Fair trade. But with all of that still years in the future, it must have been an attractive prospect, especially with the success of the film adaptation of King's first novel, Carrie, only a few short years before. But was Wolfen a good investment, or was there a good reason that it's largely been forgotten? There's only one way to know for sure, so let's tune in and find out. We open on New York City, a city of mystery, a city of intrigue, a city of coked-up Indians standing atop the Manhattan Bridge while playing a didgeridoo and feeding pigeons with their face. I don't know either, just roll with it. We're also treated to a visit to one of New York's less glamorous districts where a bit of urban renewal is underway. Either that, or this place is just crappy enough that the buildings tend to fall over on their own. Either way, this bit of urban demolition appears to wake up the Predator, who seems none too fond of having his nap interrupted, and focuses in on Christopher Vanderveer, the man in charge. Of course, walking over there and knocking him on his ass in broad daylight is out of the question, so of course it'll have to wait until nightfall. But he better not wait too long, since our didgeridoo waving pigeon snoggling friend may just beat him to it. Nice shot, asshole. Now there's broken glass all over the road. Didn't you watch any of those PSAs?
People start pollution. People can stop it.
And for those of you who may have noticed, yes, that is Edward James Olmos. So as he and his buddy race off to try and find the 13th colony of Kobold, Vanderveer and his girlfriend decide to wander about high off their asses in a New York City park. At night. In the 80s. Dressed in designer clothing and covered in jewelry. Because nothing bad could ever happen in that situation. Fortunately for them, they have a bodyguard with them, but unfortunately, he appears to be carved from warm butter and lasts about as long when the thing from the slums shows up. Vanderveer and his girlfriend are next, but only after an amazingly suspenseful sequence with an ending that's equal parts awesome and gruesome. It's a very cool scene, but it's also an intriguing mystery. Who was their mysterious assailant? Why were they killed? What does the fox say? To answer all of these questions, you'll need a tireless, relentless detective with a keen, insightful mind. In other words, it's time to call Dewey. Not quite. Instead, I'm talking about Dewey Wilson, played here by either Albert Finney or a wrinkly baked potato. He's joined by the eternally cool Gregory Hines as one of the best forensic pathologists the city has to offer.
Be careful with her. Heads.
Our tax dollars at work. Anyway, while the Wonder Twins there determined that the wounds weren't caused by any kind of blade, the security company that hired the Pillsbury Dough Guard decided to bring in a ringer of their own, an expert on terrorists named Rebecca Neff. Because terrorists are totally known for hanging around in parks at night, waiting for prominent businessmen to wander around, before tearing them limb from limb with their bare hands, before leaving them partially eaten. Of course, that doesn't stop them from picking up a suspect and engaging in a tense, revealing interrogation.
Are you aware of any information about the murder of Christopher and Pauline Vanderveer?
It wasn't a murder, Rebecca.
It wasn't a murder, Rebecca.
It was an execution.
No, she's lying. She knows nothing about the murders.
Great. Now, where does that leave us?
Like this just didn't happen.
Wow, it's not very often I watch a movie that admits to wasting my time with a pointless subplot. Kudos! Meanwhile, in a part of the movie that does matter, a homeless man finds that he's being stalked by either terrorists, the Predator, or whatever is killing people, as if we didn't already have a hint from the title. Unfortunately, the killer's a bit of a picky eater, and a construction crew finds that he's forgotten to store his leftovers in Tupperware. After a quick chat with Marty McFly's principal, ironically cast as an expert on hair follicles, Dewey and Rebecca pay a visit to the site where the hobo bits were found. While poking around an abandoned church, they hear what sounds like a crying baby. Since this seems like an odd place for a baby to be wandering about, Rebecca goes to investigate, and Dewey, sensing danger, rushes to the rescue. Nice job, Dewey. You saved her from possible harm by dragging her down a flight of steps and breaking 3 of her ribs. Of course, with night falling, the creature is in hot pursuit, and nothing will stay it from its path. Except for standard pedestrian safety, apparently. Seriously, did our terror beast just stop to look both ways before crossing the street? Although, given some of the driving in New York, I can't say that I really blame it. Of course, since they apparently stop at every crosswalk, the end result of this high-speed chase is precisely jack shit. Although it does tell them that they probably aren't up against Al-Qaeda. Armed with that knowledge, they decide to visit an animal expert who is able to conclusively tell them what the DNA evidence comes from.
Those are wolf hairs?
Oh, you bet.
Oh my god, the terrorists are using wolves as weapons! Stating the obvious aside, he also offers a bit of background that ties them in with Native Americans.
See, people kill people. Wolves don't kill people. That's a myth. I mean, they're too smart.
They're like Indians.
Wolves and Indians evolved and were destroyed simultaneously. Their societies are practically one and the same.
True enough, they even had their cultures sold out as crappy 3-wolf moon shirts at the same time. And as pointless as all of that may seem, it does remind Dewey of Eddie Holt, better known to us as Edward James Olmos. Since he was convicted of manslaughter and was spotted on the bridge the night of the murder, Dewey decides to pay Dances with Cylons a visit, and decides that the best possible place to confront a murder suspect is on top of a bridge. Of course, he does learn a little more about Edward James Olmos than he probably wants to know.
You keep in touch?
With what? The guy next door, your mother, what?
Mother Nature.
Sure. I can swim like a fish and I fuck like a bunny.
Ew, I did not need to know that Edward James Olmos can fuck like a bunny.
Go on, Dewey. It's easy.
And I don't need to think about Albert Finney doing it either. Still, Dewey needs to follow up and tails him to the beach once he's off work. And it's there that he witnesses the most terrifying transformation in the history of horror cinema. My god, I know it's nice to see people try something new, but really? Edward James Olmos running around with his junk flapping in the breeze is about as far from terrifying as you can get. Frankly, it's ridiculous, and there's no way anybody could ever possibly find that frightening. Oh my god, I think he heard us. He's headed right for us. Run, Dewey! Serpentine! Serpentine! Please don't rape me, Edward James Olmos.
I told you, man. It's all in the head.
So, while Dewey cowers from Captain Adama's Wang of Fury, we catch up with our nature expert, who, after filling out a report on wolves for Dewey, gets to observe wolves stalking their natural prey, the moped-riding dipshit. Gee, guess it's a good thing that wolves don't kill humans, right?
Wolves don't kill people, that's a myth.
Anyway, while Fergie gets a little bit closer to nature, Dewey is having entirely understandable flashbacks to his near sexual assault by Edward James Olmos. Slightly less terrifying, but nonetheless problematic, he's pretty sure that he's being stalked by wolves. Understandably a bit stressed, he heads to Rebecca's apartment to talk it out. Ugh, damn it, movie, I told you I didn't even want to think about that! Suitably horrified by the sight of Albert Finney's naked, thrusting ass, the wolves retreat. Dewey, who apparently can't freaking stand it when the dog's watching while he's on the job, finally decides that it's time to take on the creatures. And to do so, he recruits the deadliest man available to him.
I'm a dead shot and a karate expert. My whole body's a weapon.
It was either that or dig up Fergie. So, armed with some high-powered rifles and night vision scopes, the two head out to the slums to plug some wolves. Of course, it'll probably help that there's a full moon out tonight. Although, I guess the Wolfen are in a mood for rump roast, since while Dewey checks out the church, they go after his medical examiner buddy, who is fortunately well equipped to defend himself. Yep, he's doomed. Sure enough, one mouthful of neck meats later, and he's off to that big karate medical examiner dojo in the sky. Dewey is understandably upset. Really? If you're going for a stock sound effect, you might as well go with a classic. Wilhelm! Nein! So, understandably bummed that his pal is now puppy chow, Dewey does what any sensible man would do. Heads to the nearest bar. There he finds Eddie Holt and an unnamed character who I can only assume is named Running Exposition. The two explain to Dewey that the creatures he's hunting aren't actually wolves, but Wolfen, wolf-like animals that have adapted to live in human cities, smart enough to evade capture by feeding exclusively on the homeless. Dewey is understandably shocked by this revelation, although there's something else I find even more shocking. Oh my god, they're were-pigeons. Dewey, looking about as stoned as Eddie seems most of the time, heads to Vanderveer's apartment where everything finally comes together. The Wolfen killed Vanderveer because he was starting an urban renewal project, and that would have meant an end to their hunting grounds. Fortunately, Dewey isn't the only one who's figured out who's responsible and why.
11283, apprehension of terrorist group Gotterdammerung. Alleged suspects of the Vanderveer slaying.
Yep, they finally found the terrorist group responsible for killing Vanderveer and hunted them down, either killing or capturing them all. Insert your own Bush administration joke here. Anyway, with the threat safely over, we can all breathe a sigh of relief and go home to our safe, warm beds where... Oh, right. Wolfen. Yep, the Wolfen have finally decided that it's time to wipe out the last few people who know of their existence. All in all, it's a pretty impressive sequence. The image of a pack of wolves surrounding someone on a deserted city street is a striking one, and we get to see just how intelligent and coordinated these creatures really are.
Good 48 shock is dead.
And they can apparently open and close car doors too. Fair enough, although I've got to admit, I would pay good money to see them get into a car chase with Albert Finney. Fortunately, the car's apparently a Ford Pinto, and after it goes up in a rather excessive fireball, the two haul ass to the penthouse where there's no way that the Wolfen can follow them. Come on, really? There's no way that they could climb up there. Unless they can fly. In which case... hail to our new lupine overlords. So, once Dewey shakes off his shock at meeting the Wolfen equivalent of the Super Friends, he realizes there's no way in hell he's walking out of this if he tries to fight them. Instead, he decides to wreck the ever-loving shit out of the model of Vanderveer's land development, proving to the Wolfen that their hunting ground is safe and showing them that they have no reason to fear him. Holy shit, I was just joking about the predator thing. Thankfully, the cavalry arrives just in time to blow the hell out of the drapes, and Dewey offers some pretentious voiceover while we see the Wolfen free to run and live and slaughter God knows how many homeless people. The perfect example of the circle of life if ever I've heard it. At least until they refurbished the area into suburbs in the 90s, proving that Dewey is just as good at keeping his promise to natives as every white man ever. Anyway, that's Wolfen, and to be honest, I actually liked it. If I had to boil Wolfen down to a single word, that word would be smart. I know I gave this movie a bit of a hard time, but when you take it apart, it's got a clever premise behind its villain, a plot that hasn't been done to death, and a hell of a lot of clever dialogue. I'm not kidding, one of the hardest parts of making this episode was deciding whether to include some of the awesome dialogue or not. So far I've shown incredible restraint, but I just can't help myself. Enjoy!
Well, let's see what happened to my man. 2 bullet holes upside the head. See? You shouldn't have been fucking with that bitch.
You know, dude, you could use a haircut. Wanna lie down?
Not till it's my turn.
Identification.
My face.
I need credentials.
All that separates you from a guard dog is a brain.
Okay, Captain.
Good dog. What's the matter with you? You bored? I'm thinking. Just not used to the expression. Oh.
And that is just a small sample. Sadly, not a lot of people seem to understand this movie, and I partly blame that on the expectations people bring to the table. The worst one being the idea that this is a werewolf movie. Although part of this is the movie's own fault, there are a lot of red herrings in this movie, and one of the biggest ones is the idea that the killer might be a man that's able to turn into a wolf. Even though that theory gets disproven and the movie eventually spells out what they really are, people tend to hold on to a familiar concept, and it confuses them when it turns out that their beliefs were wrong. You can see the same reaction in other series, like Halloween 3, when people get pissed and ask what the hell this has to do with Michael Myers. Even Roger Ebert, one of the most beloved critics of the last 40 years, came to the wrong conclusion, stating that he thought the movie was about the possibility that wolves and Native Americans could exchange souls. Which would explain both the hyper-intelligent wolves and Edward James Olmos running around buck-naked foaming at the mouth. Whereas the truth is, he just liked to do it for fun. And that's actually quite a bit more disturbing now that I think about it. Even with a smart story and good writing, the rest of the production is no slouch. The gore, although minimal, is very well done, perhaps because it's subtle. I made quite a few cracks about the Predator during the review, and that's actually pretty fitting, given that the Wolf Vision uses the same technique they eventually used for that movie. And if there's only one other thing that I have to mention about this movie, it is the amazing musical score from James Horner. At this point, he was still years away from composing the soundtrack to Aliens, which is one of my all-time favorite OSTs, but his work here is still fantastic. Seriously, listen to this. Now, if that's not music to be mauled by wolves to, I don't know what is. Of course, the movie does have a few points against it, including being too wrapped up in its fixation on Native American mysticism for its own good, and it can be a bit slow at times. Of course, these are minor sins, and terrible reasons to overlook an otherwise great movie. Anyway, that's all we have time for this week. Tune in next time as we head back to Crystal Lake for Friday the 13th Part 2. Till then, this is the Fear Fan, signing off.